Hello, everyone. I am Sister Regine Saitaki. I'm the director of A Nun's Life, and I am here with my good friend, Sister Julia. And I'm the director of A Nun's Life. Oh, shoot. And I am here with my good friend, Sister Julia. Okay. Now, why? I must have Facebook up 2 times. Hang on a second.
Is it okay? Maybe it was me.
Oh, maybe it was you. Okay.
I just closed it though. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's me, Julia. Sorry about that, friend.
No worries. You can have it up on your screen, Julia. You just have to hit the mute.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have it? Okay. All right. All right. No worries. Okay. So yes. So we're just going to do a Facebook Live conversation tonight about podcasting, faith, discerning vocations, and more. You know, we're a small group of people that are actually, Catholic sisters and also podcasters, and it's just been a great ministry. So for those of you that are with us, just know we'd love to hear from you. Feel free in the comment box to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and if you have any questions for us, we would be happy to answer them tonight. Okay, so yeah, I don't know, Julia, do you want to introduce yourself and like all the many hats you wear?
Yeah, like most sisters, I do a lot of things, right? Okay, so my main ministries is that I'm the minister of discerners for my congregation, which is the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, based in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so vocation minister means, or minister of discerners means, women who are thinking about they want to maybe be a Catholic sister or discerning, trying to figure out if they're called to do this with their lives. I have the privilege of accompanying them on that journey and getting to know them and helping them explore as they go through that search. So I do that. I'm also a spiritual director. I'm also a writer, and I do freelance writing, spiritual writing. I also have my first book is going to be coming out in April 2024, published by Monkfish Press, and it's a spiritual memoir about my novitiate, the first 2 years prior to making my first vows as a sister. And the title of the book is For Love of the Broken Body. And so that's forthcoming in a while. And hopefully readers will be able to find it wherever the books are sold in a year from now. In addition, I host the Messy Jesus Business podcast and website, which includes blogs and reflections, but the podcast is one of the things that we do there. And I work with a really great team of writers and editors and all sorts of people that I'll tell you about. It takes a village to offer goodness to the world. So yeah, that's who I am. I live here in Chicago, in a place called the Fireplace Community, which is an intentional community and house of hospitality to offer spiritual support and refuge and community to artists, activists, and spiritual seekers. So folks who are searching and trying to figure things out or need some renewal or whatever they're seeking. The real change makers in the world, I'd like to think, are the ones who come here for retreats and join us for dinners and sorts of things like that. Anyway, that's me. How about you, Regine? What are all the things you do?
Well, yes. So I'm the director of A Nun's Life. Again, very similar website-based, social media, podcast, blogs. And yes, it does take a team of people, villagers, to make it work with our online community. And shout out to Elizabeth Defner, who is graciously helping us with this, and especially tonight. And That's one of my hats. Another hat is I work with the Charity Federation vocation team. So I do a lot of interacting with discerners just in as the nature of this ministry. And so I said I'd be happy to look at it. There's like 14 congregations we kind of collaborate on working with discerners. So that's
Which
cool.
community I'm sorry, which community are you with?
I'm
I mean,
a
I
sister.
know, but maybe they don't.
I'm a sister of Charity of Leavenworth, as in Kansas.
Got
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. No, I just kind of do that sometimes, just kind of gloss over some of these things. But I also work with our Care Creation Committee. So anything like working for environmental sustainability and kind of mediating some of the climate change effects. And so I chair that. So yeah. And I guess the last thing I would say is I am a volunteer counselor for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So my plug for those, if you know people that are having mental health challenges, I encourage them to call 988, or you yourself can call 988 and get some resources. So
988.
988. They're making that like 911 is, your physical health emergencies, crimes. But 988 is for mental health. And it's kind of exciting to see as that gets integrated across the country.
That's really important. Great. I love that you do that.
Yeah. Well,
the sisters do so many things. People just
we do. We totally do.
Yeah.
So there's a couple people out there. Obviously, my sister mate out there is Pat Johansson. We share life together. And Dee, hello. And then if you're just joining us, I'm Sister Rachel. This is Sister Julia, and we're talking about podcasting, vocations, and more. And feel free to pop in the chat if you have any questions. Let us know. So that would be great. Okay, I'm going to start off. Julia, how did you get into podcasting?
Oh, yeah.
And what prepared you for it?
What prepared me for it?
Kind of two different questions.
Okay, so let me talk about a few things that kind of helped me to feel the nudge, I would say. Even though I took a vow of poverty like you, I would say I'm very rich in relationship, and I feel so fortunate to know so many amazing people. And there's just a lot of people who I recognize are leaders and people on the margins, people who are world changers, right? And I'm so inspired by them. And I was noticing for a few years that I kept finding myself in these really interesting conversations with folks where I was like, oh, tell me more about that story. Oh, how did you figure that out? Oh, how did you write your book? How did you become a songwriter? How did you and as I was in these conversations and exploring the people's paths with them and getting to know them better and such, I kept having this feeling that this should be recorded. Like the things the person is saying are worthwhile for other people to hear, because they're offering something really wise, and it feels too possessive and privileged that I'm the only one hearing this conversation. So I kept just noticing that and paying attention to it. And then I went into a spiritual direction training and learned to be a better listener, I hope to God. And also, I mean, prior to that, I was a retreat leader and I was a high school theology teacher. So those, and a catechist in a parish. So like all those sort of roles and ways that I've served and come to explore the mysteries with folks formed this question about podcasting. So then as the question came up, it was kind of before podcasting really took off. I started thinking about it seriously in 2018, 2019. And then the fall of 2019, I started admitting to my sisters, I think I might want to try this out. And I was presenting different ways I might do that with them. And they said, oh, just make that part of Messy Jesus business. Like you already got people. Oh yeah, I do. Because my blog was already about 10 years old. And there's, a lot of people who already were subscribing and reading it regularly. So So that's how that happened. And then I actually the first I was all signed up to go to a workshop and have some people train me in podcasting. Uh whatever the date would have been, maybe like March 17th or something, 2020, something like that, whatever that weekend was. And um and that was my first thing that was canceled on my calendar. And so then they did the training for me virtually, and that was my first entrance into that. And then I just dove right in. I was listening to a podcast during that time that just had a little season, and it was made by I think it was a kindergartner or a preschooler, and his dad worked in radio, but so he helped him with the audio, but he was just interviewing people about how are they keeping away corona.
Oh,
And it was so dear. He like called his kindergarten, I think it was a kindergarten teacher, kindergartner, and he called his kindergarten teacher and was like, "What are you doing at home? Tell me about what it's like to be in your house," and recorded these things. And it was just, and I was like, if a kindergartner can do this, I think I can give it a try. So I just jumped in with like not really knowing, and that gave me the courage. Yeah. Mhm. So yeah, what about you, Rejan? How did you get into it?
well, I have to say that's a great story.
I should look up the link because it's so sweet. Or people might want to know it, and I can put it in the chat. Let me see if I can find it.
You should.
Yeah.
I think you got in earlier than I did. It wasn't until 21. And I always give Sister Maxine Kolash and Julie Vieira the credit because they really jumped into podcasting and at the ground level back in like between 2010, like around 2010. And so they know the industry, inside and out. But for me, I love to try new things and I love the adventure of it. And I think like what prepared me for it is, I'm a reader, I'm an avid reader, and I love the art of storytelling. And that has always been something that I've enjoyed doing and listening to other people. And what was so interesting is at the same time as I was getting ready for take this ministry position as a director of Another's Life, is I was training for the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I mean, that's intense training about really what I would say. It's about deep listening, right? Like getting yourself out of the way and just fully focusing on this other person and reflecting back to them what you're hearing. So you're not really interjecting yourself into the conversation. And I found that kind of comes in, it has stood me in good stead, those skill sets when it comes to working in the podcasting field. Like I'm trying to listen at a deeper level to get the story. Like what is it that makes this person's story a meaningful life? And so I would say that's part of where I have come from with it. And I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It probably helps that both of us are decent conversationalists.
That too, right? Like you've got to be able to talk and draw people out and make them comfortable, right? That's half of the battle.
Yeah. And I mean, I know I could even go back farther and think about like I grew up in a really social family where people were really, really talkative, and when I'm home, like people talk. It's just so that does help.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because I'm really a natural introvert.
Yeah, I am too.
And I thank my mother, who's much more extroverted, and she kind of pushed me out in the world. Mm-hmm. And I would just say over time I've gotten better at it, so I can function pretty well. With people. So yeah. that is interesting, that you say that, but you're right, you have to be social and be good at communications.
Yeah, that's right, it does help.
It does.
Yeah. So Rejan, I was wondering, since you came into this thing that already was going, how did you climb the learning curve, and like how did you like learn it all, since you, it's not like you came from public radio or something?
Right. Well, Sister Maxine really was instrumental in getting me trained with this. And we spent, well, first I think we kind of looked at the workflow, and Max was kind of doing all the different steps to it. And she said, we can parse this out, and we kind of created, and we were able to hire a program director and an audio editor. And then I could focus on the skill set of learning how to podcast. And we did practice podcasts. So I would podcast with kind of talking with Max, and then talking with Elizabeth and Kelly, my other staff. And we would, like I'd get a pre-interview. So like they would give me, this is kind of my story. And then I would kind of come up with some questions, and then we just have a conversation. And I think the toughest part was you can prepare, but then there's a flow to it, and you kind of have to go with the flow. And at the same time, something they tell you didn't know, and like, wait a minute, tell me more about that, because you have to listen as if you're in the audience. And you have to think, what do you think? Maybe the listener caught that too, and they want to know more about that. Like, perfect example would be, I was doing this practice interview with Sister Pat, who's out there, and she said, my dad was a dry wheat farmer. And I missed that cue. And afterwards, the Kelly and Max who were listening, like, oh, I really wanted to know what is dry wheat farming? Like, I've never heard that term. What's that about? Like, right, that has nothing to do with her vocation at all, but it's just like a cool fact. And so that you all know, it means there's really no water involved. They're not irrigating. Okay. So it's all up to Mother Nature if the wheat gets watered or not. So a lot more risky than if you have an irrigation system. But things like that. That was tough to try and able to hear things that you're curious about, and someone else might be curious about, and to pick up on that. Because later, I mean, that like the podcast lives, and people might be like, oh, I wish you'd asked more about that. So trying to get that in there. I don't know. Does that make sense, Julia?
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of tough, and just, being okay with, like letting it just flow, but being natural with it. Yeah. So I might not get to all my questions, and that's okay. Like, you just, because it is different than just a straight interview, right? It's a conversation. And as Max would always tell me, like, there's another person sitting at that table with you, and it's the listener. So make sure you also explain things or ask questions that they might help the listener also be part of the conversation.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And I know for myself too, like there's a lot of different podcasts out there. Some podcasts are people literally sitting by themselves and talking, right? Sometimes it's like people just themselves, they have a conversation with each other on the topics, like a team of people or a couple of people. But both of us, the thing that Nun's Life and Messy Jesus Business has in common is both of our podcasts, we're interviewing guests. And so the skill of interviewing is, like you said, it's really going with the flow. It's following their leads. It's letting the person say what they want to say, and not having the agenda. And so I'm wondering what sort of, in your preparation, what sort of questions you tend to come up with to help you make sure that you're not controlling the conversation, and you're letting the speaker's voice be amplified.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for pointing that out, that we both have a similar kind of overview with
Yeah,
our
format.
podcast, right? Because there are so many out there. And I
Yeah.
kind of remember, I will get to your question, but I do remember like some of the first podcasts I was listening to were just like one person talking, right? And just like maybe let's say it was on farming or gardening, because I'm an avid person, and that's all they would talk about, right? And so that's like a whole different kind of type of a podcast. Yeah.
It
But
is.
you
It's
know,
like sometimes they're more like documentaries or, and I think if I were to give a suggestion about like how to get started, my suggestion would be like listen to like 15 podcasts that are totally different styles
Yeah.
and see what style you think makes the most sense for you. Like that would be the first step. Right.
Right. And that's how you tend to gravitate towards podcasts that, that you are interested in. And no, I love the interactive ones, more so than the just one person. So, because there is just that dynamic. It's just a flow. But okay, okay, remind me, what was your question again? I totally just blanked. I'm gonna be honest.
Well, yeah, no, how do you come up with questions so that in a way that you're not controlling the conversation?
Sure. Well, I mean, because with the nun's life, it's about vocation. So we want to know, like about the a sister's call. And I tend to do, all my podcasts are with religious sisters, Catholic nuns. And so there's usually that, and then also about their ministry. And so what helps me is my program director does a pre-interview. Okay. And so just to kind of get the life story and those kind of two parts, those two, vocation and ministry. And but then you can come at it from different angles. And sometimes I'll start with ministry, sometimes I'll start with the vocation call. But I guess once I have that pre-interview in front of me and there's some questions, and then I can kind of delve in a different way, based on how I read through it. But I mean, right, like I think one of the things I really want to get at is what is your relationship like with God, with Jesus, like that interior life, right? And what did that look like, your call? And some are willing to articulate it more than others, and you have to just meet your guests where they are. And that is good enough. So some people are more, they want to talk about the ministry and the work, and then others are willing to talk about their call. So yeah, it just depends. But yeah, I want to see what's meaningful for them in their life. I think in the end, that's probably the biggest essence, because that's, no matter if you're a sister or not, that's what you can relate to, right? Vocation in the big sense that
Yeah,
I want a meaningful life.
meaningful.
Yeah. I don't know. How do you go about with your questions and coming up with questions?
Yeah, well, so I don't have a pre-interview process or anything like that, but I do send my guests a form when
Okay.
when I invite them to come on the podcast, and then it's sort of like, here's the information about what this is, and then please pick out a time and a date, and this is the available slots, and then please fill out this form. And on that form, I ask for their bio. I ask like, what do they most love talking about, or something like this. And if there's someone who has a public presence already, like maybe articles have been written about them, or they're a writer or a speaker or a teacher or something, then I'll try to take in some of their work. Some people, sometimes it's not possible to take in everything, but try to take in a little bit, so that I get a sense of their personality and their passions, because that's really what I want to explore. But really, I try to just basically come up with like 5 to 6 questions that I hope I get to in the conversation. And then in my listening, I'll ask more clarifying questions as we go, or as things come up. I'm like, oh, that da da da. And I'll be very responsive and conversational as well, and try to make it less like a formal interview and more like a make it sound like two people that are friends have talking deeply about something meaningful. But I always ask about some, in one way or another, like their vocation story or their identity, or like who they are as a person, or how they follow Jesus, how they came to the path that they're on. Um, and then because Messy Jesus Business is exploring Christian discipleship, radical discipleship, I ask them questions about like what is discipleship for you, and then what is also like messy about following Jesus, because it's Messy Jesus Business. So that's those questions are like, I always try to ask those three questions in different ways, and not always include sometimes the answers, to tell you the truth. We really edit the interviews, and so sometimes the answers, like what they say, maybe they ramble too much, or what they said was actually kind of like cliche, and like three of my guests said something similar. God bless them. Then we just, we wanted to provide new, fresh content to the audience. So maybe we'll just cut that section out. And yeah.
Well, and I mean, that is the beauty of it, right? It's not live like what you and I are doing right now, right?
Right. Yeah.
We can't edit this out. If you're listening, you're getting this unedited version, right? But in a podcast, yes. And I have an audio editor who's a contractor, and so she does a wonderful job for us. Yes, because right, you know, sometimes like maybe I'm saying too many times.
Yeah.
And I forgot that was part of the training too, like to listen to it, that you would always listen back to it and kind of critique yourself. Or maybe I'm saying like too many times because I grew up in the 80s, and that's kind of embedded in my unconsciousness. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. So would you mind? Oh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I was wondering if you spoke about your editor. I'm curious because I know we don't have the same workflow and process, and how does your workflow work? Like what one episode, like how do you start from idea to final product? What are all the things you do?
Yeah. So of course, the first thing is like getting a guest, right? And sometimes it's I've heard their story and I think it's unique, or maybe we've seen them online somewhere, or a friend says this would be a good one, or sometimes we have sponsorships, so sometimes a congregation's like, what do you think? Would you interview our sister? I had for Catholic Sisters Week, some of the Communicators for Women Religious reach out to me and say, hey, we're the state of Wisconsin, we want to showcase someone, and then we'll blast it out with all our congregations. So we, and that one was on social justice. So yeah, it just kind of depends. But again, like I'm more focused on Catholic sisters and telling their stories. So that's kind of how it starts. And then my program director will reach out to them and come up with, like I said, a pre-interview, and kind of type up her notes, give me some basic questions. And then I will sit with that. And she does the scheduling. I'm so grateful for that. And then maybe tweak those questions. And then we use Zencastr, which is our platform, similar to Zoom, but it does a better job with the audio files, and everything is saved there. And so once that's done, I really have a team of three, right? Program director, myself, and the audio editor. So we're all kind of listening to it. And of course, I also have to go back and record like intros and breaks, things like this. And then the audio editor kind of puts it all together. But then the program director is the one that's kind of, posting it. We use Libsyn as our main platform host for the podcast, and then making sure it gets out to all the other venues as well, and the social media. So we really are a team in some ways. And so I would say, again, I'm just grateful for the program director role, because she really does the brunt of kind of making sure we're all on task and have enough time, right? The audio editor has the time to get it done, and then for the program director to get it out there. So it is a process. And again, I don't know how like Max did all of it herself, because I think you can spend hours just on the editing from what I've heard.
Well, yeah. I can say from experience you can.
At some point you just have to like let it go. It's good enough.
Right.
But yeah, so what does your workflow look like, Julia? And yeah, you must have a team. I know you have some people with you.
Yeah, I do. Thanks be to God. So I'm so grateful. Yeah. So there's been a variety of folks who have helped me along the way. But when I started my little experiment, inspired by the kindergartner, I did everything, and I quickly learned that it was way too much. It was much more time consuming than I expected it to be. And I felt like I was hitting a wall, and at the same time I was loving parts of the work, but I was starting to get drained by it. So I thought, okay, how do I make this sustainable? And fortunately, I was then able to have someone help me with the audio editing, and I've had 2 different people help me with that over the years since I launched. And so anyway, the current process is myself or somebody else sends out an email to the guest, and we invite them to come on the show and invite them to fill out the form like I mentioned to you, and schedule. And then once they're scheduled, then we actually do our interviews through Zoom at this point. We may change in our software, but so anyway, we follow up with the Zoom link. We remind them that when the interview is coming. We ask the guest to send us their picture and their bio, and some of those their social media handles and things like that. Then when I record the interview, usually the sound engineer sits in and he listens. And so he takes notes on things as we go along and through the interview. And then so we're recording it. I have a headset and everything, and I'm recording it on a device called a Rodecaster, which is an audio. It records multiple tracks of the audio file, so that way their voice is a different track than my voice for the editing. And if there's background noises, those become another audio track. So that helps with the audio editing. And then so then I send the files and stuff, and he does all the editing, and then and we kind of have set closing and start, and so he just pretty much reuses those things. Then there's show notes that have to get written. And so that's a team effort. And there's a third person who is really the editor, the writing editor for Messy Jesus Business, and she helps with the show notes too. And so then we release it, and then there's the social media promotion and such, and making sure that things went through okay on all the different channels where people can subscribe and listen. So there's a lot of steps for one episode, and it's not cheap either. That's one of the things that I would say has surprised me, is it's actually pretty expensive to make a podcast episode. I don't know if we want to say that, but I think our listeners might be surprised to know. So how much does it cost for you?
Yeah, thanks, Julia, for asking and bringing this up. Tomorrow, just for our listeners, is our day of giving.
Oh yeah.
Friends Life, yes. Well, we had our finance person kind of crunch the numbers, and I would say about $1,500 would be about right when you put in all the time, at least for a Nun's Life, and then You've got several different people working on it. I mean, the beauty though of podcast is that it's online, it's accessible, it's free, anyone can have it, but it does cost money. You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you don't have commercials either, do you?
No, we don't.
Yeah, like so a lot of podcasts exist and they have commercials in them, and that's how they pay for themselves. But both you and Messages Business, we're both, I mean, and probably in principle, because we're Catholic sisters, we don't want to be selling anything except maybe Jesus.
Right.
The
Well,
gospel.
I do have sponsors, and so at certain
Okay.
levels they can, I will mention them as a sponsor for A Nun's Life. So I do have some of that, but it doesn't
Okay.
cover completely, the costs of these
Right.
podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, so-
Yeah. And I don't, this is my Messages Business is a media ministry of my congregation, and it's part of our PR and communications and our vocation promotion,
Yeah.
just like religious life promotion budgets. But yeah, I do make a little shout out at the end, like if people want to donate, we don't mind it, and I'm sure you do the same. So
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
and I think Messages Business costs about the same. If I don't pay myself for it, so if I counted up my own hours, that would
Right.
that would be
That's-
another thing.
Catholic
Especially
sisters are
like
very
I'm
good
having-
about that.
right. I like if I have an author on and I, like, oh, I got to read their book before they, okay, that's ours. But no, I don't. Yeah, it's we're probably since I'm not getting any pay for the work, I think the cost is like probably between $600 and to $1,000 per episode.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, we one of our listeners, hello, Sister June Fitzgerald. She said, thanks for being real. She's another sister podcaster out there.
Yeah.
She can relate to what we are talking about right now. And I forgot to tell you, one of our listeners is in the United Kingdom. Dee is in England. So
Wow, welcome, Dee.
yeah, you just never know where people are coming from these days.
Yeah, and that's true with podcasting too. Where do you reach with the
Well, we're in over 750 countries. I mean,
amazing.
yeah. And average about, it depends, 3,000 to 5,000 downloads a week. Asia's obviously the United States, North America, Canada and the US are the top listenership, but then Asia comes in, Africa comes in, Europe. So yeah, we kind of are all over.
That's great.
It's kind of exciting, and that's what I see when I get like messages like Facebook Messenger or from my website. I'm getting people all over the world asking me questions. But I was meaning to ask you, how do you pick your guests? How do you ask? 'Cause-
Everyone probably wants to know.
Oh,
Especially because people pitch and like maybe people have a book coming out or another creative project, and so sometimes people reach out on and send us emails and ask if they can come on the show. And most of the time I'm not interested in those pitches, to be honest. And it's partly because I don't want to lose the feel of Messages Business being about like two friends talking. And so I kind of have this long list of cool people that I already know who I want to interview. Right. And it's a lot of sisters and sometimes some priests. And I mean, there's some ordinary folks and some big names, and and I just like, this is kind of like the list of people that I think, oh yeah, they'd be interesting. And really we're just working our way through that list. And it's a combination. Like I really want each season to be a combination of like, and I try to be really balanced about that it's a little more women than men, a little more people of color than people who are not people of color. I want it to be people who are like some famous, like people who have followings or whatever you call it, and then people who aren't, and I just really try to have that all really balanced, because the mission of the Messy Jesus business overall is to invite people to see that there's a wide range of ways you can live the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? And to invite people to reflect on the messiness of doing so. So like, yeah, I mean, we've had like I've had Helen Perjan and James Martin and some of those like Catholic circles, big names. But then I recently had one of our mutual friends, Sister Krista Parra, who's a sister who works on the border and works in a shelter in Ciudad Juarez. And she's not like a person who's, you know, bold and out there, but she's brilliant and she's wise and she's walking the talk. So I want to amplify her voice too. Yeah. So that's honestly how I pick folks. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, like it's very similar, right? It's usually like they have some kind of aspect or story that to their story they think, oh, that's cool. The world should know about that. So,
Oh,
you know, one example would be I I was doing, I think it might have been Giving Tuesday, and got a generous donation and from Barb Giel, and she said, I just want to thank you. Another's Life has been very helpful for my discernment. And I just made first vows with the Mercies, and so she's a sister now. But I called to talk to her, and it turns out, later in life vocation, she's a grandmother. I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. Not many Catholic sisters can say this, right? So like the tagline is like, Catholic sister, grandmother, and we said nurse, something like this. And it's really caught people's eyes. To hear her story is a powerful one. And you can tell like that from when she like first had a call in like high school, but had married and had a wonderful marriage and children, and yet had always stayed connected with the Mercies, like and just such a deep interior life. Like
yeah.
you can see why they would take her. And one of the first things she said is like, religious life is not a retirement plan. Well, because it's so true. When you've lived a full life and you've had, you've owned property and made all your decisions without having to do it communally. Like I can't imagine trying it later. So I mean, it was a wonderful. So that was one way. But one person I haven't got a hold of her, but I was at a Communicators for Women Religious, and Sister Norma Pimentel was talking, and she said, I became a nun because of pizza. Just like she told this awesome story about that. So like I went up to her afterwards. She's like, yeah, I'll do a podcast, but you have to reach out to my my administrative assistant and set it up. So because that's just brilliant. Like she really was not religious, not into it at all. And it got her out of the house. Her friend was going to a charismatic prayer group, and she's like, well, and Norma's like, are you going, will there be pizza afterwards? Oh yeah. So, and then she just got into it, and that's how it went. But I just like, she's like, God got me through the hook of pizza. I mean, it's just a great, like those fun things, like it's ordinary, right? It's all in the ordinary, that the extraordinary, and that the Holy Spirit works. And it's
Yeah. And as you say that, it reminds me how like what I hope people get out of Messy Jesus business, and I mean, I think they can get out of yours, out of Anem's life too, is like, um, God is in the ordinary things, and all of it is actually good and holy, and it's just really about like how we're paying attention and noticing, right? And actually, I mean, it normalizes it, like, and that's what I really want, is to normalize uh being devoted to Jesus in whatever form that takes. Be like taking Jesus's teaching seriously and trying to live them out. Like there's a wide range of ways that it works to follow the Spirit, to be a child of God, and to show people that through the stories, and to really try to get to the stories is the heart of it for me.
Well, yeah, and the relationship piece, right? Like what I love is like even in that podcast, like I'm like in the process of creating a relationship with the person that I'm talking with, right?
Yeah.
And I want to know, like, what's your relationship with Jesus? Like, there is, because it's not tangible, but there is an inner life and an interior life. And if we can get to that point of talking about it, it's powerful, because then, like you said, it normalizes it for someone else who is trying to find their way, right? And like some people are like, yeah, I had a dream and that's why I became a sister. And or whereas like I'll always be like with mine, I'm like, yeah, well, I was right there, and I'm like, okay, God, tell me what to do. And God's like, it's your choice. And I was like, no, I want to be told. So like we all have our own different stories. And yeah, yeah, but it normalizes it, that just as we have relationships with other people, we need to have a relationship with God.
Yeah. And isn't it true that a lot, when you're going through something, if you're not around other people who are telling similar stories or have gone through similar experiences, you can almost think something's wrong with you when you're like, "Gee, God, I feel like God's asking me to do something. Does anybody else feel this?" Like, but so to have a place like both of our podcasts, they can listen to it and they're like, "Oh, I guess this is normal."
Right, right.
I know that's really helpful to me.
No, it
Mhm.
is. And when you think about it, we have language around like mental health and physical health, but I think we're in a time where when it comes to like I've gotten to the point, like, of saying interior life, um more so than even spirituality, I think, because I want to try and make it more tangible for people. But
Mm.
um like language is I think a struggle when we're talking about something that I don't know, we something we cannot you cannot just put your finger on it at
That's so
all,
exact.
right? It's a mystery. When you're talking about a mystery, and that's where I think like poetry and prayer, there's a lot of intersections.
Mm.
Writing, you talk around it and do the best you can to hold the container, but yeah, but through storytelling, you can start to see patterns, right? And then you're right, it does help that you're not isolated, and other people have these God moments in their life, and they may not even know what language to call it, but there's a call. Oh, I got to do this with my life.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Mhm. No, I was thinking that like this jam session, musician said, I was in Oregon looking out my window, and this inner voice said, you got to go to Kansas. And 20 years later, here I am. Like would he have put that as a God moment? Probably not. But like, it's still, it's it still is part of it. It's still
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah. It's beyond yourself. Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm, mhm. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah,
Julia.
this has been fun. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I love connecting with others that are in this field and
Thanks for having me on.
enjoying it. So, yes.
And I hope that all your donors give generously tomorrow.
Oh, thank
Now that
you.
they know that podcasting is expensive, but yet you're reaching a lot of people, they should be generous.
So true. So true.
Right.
I appreciate it. All
Yeah.
right. So thank you all to our audience and for being out there with us.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
so we're gonna say good night.
Good night. Peace.
Bye. Okay.